and then we're gonna take off the mask. Okay, wait. In 3, 2, 1.
Oh. So my husband recently took me to New Mexico for a surprise trip, as you can see, and it was such an amazing trip. But I think the reason why it inspired me to create this video is because even though we've been married, so we've been married for 2 years, we've been together for over 7 years, I realized that I had all these expectations going into this trip, and we still had a tiff and an argument. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, I wish that I knew these things before I got married. And so in this video, I'm going to share with you all the things that I wish I knew before I got married. Your partner is your biggest, fattest mirror. I was reading a statistic that 42 to 45% of first marriages end in divorce, 60% of second marriages end in divorce, and then 73% of third marriages end in divorce. So the funny thing is that you would think after reading that statistic, you'll be like, oh, well, then I guess I just shouldn't get married then. I can't find the right person for me. But in my opinion, I think that if you have a fundamental thing that you have not worked through yourself, it's always going to be reflected by the person that's closest to you. And in the case of a marriage, that's normally your spouse. So I would say that there are a lot of things that trigger me about my husband. And I realize they trigger me so much because deep inside of me, I have those issues. And all my husband is a big fat mirror for me to see, oh shoot, these are the things that I need to work on. The reason why it bothers me is because it's displayed so openly for me to see. So this goes back to just how the whole life is a mirror. There's this principle by Neville Goddard, the mirror principle, where life is a mirror, and that most of the time people don't know that. And so they're living their life kind of thinking that, they're trying to change the mirror, but really what they need to do is change themselves. And then the mirror will then reflect back to you this other version of yourself, right? So I guess what I'm trying to say is that if you are expecting the other person to change, then that is where the biggest problem there lies. I, for many, many years, just really thought that, oh my gosh, like I had to change my husband, right? Like I had to change everything about him so that I could be happy. But what I realized is that, when you're married, you're having someone that's literally in front of you that is showcasing all of the things that you need to work on. By the way, if you want a video on the mirror principle, let me know in the comments below, and make sure you like and subscribe to this channel so that you can hear more from me. Because essentially, working on the mirror principle really helped me a lot. It changed my entire perspective on life and essentially also my marriage. One of the things that is very overlooked is core values. Discussing core values before getting married. Now, this is something that we did talk about, but I would actually take it a step further and talk about definition. I didn't learn about definitions until we got married, and actually that came through this card deck by John Gray and Bonnie Meyer. But basically my husband and I, we pull cards from this deck every single Sunday during our relationship ritual. And we pulled this card called definitions. Now, definitions is basically when there's a word and you ask your partner or your husband how they define that word. Because the thing is, everyone has a different definition when it comes to a specific word. And that is why sometimes core values can be overlooked. So for instance, before my husband and I got married, we did this exercise together where we were trying to figure out if our core values were aligned, right? I mean, most likely when you get to the part where you're gonna get married, you do have aligned values or you wouldn't be getting married. Maybe you don't actively talk about it, but it's probably floating in the background. However, I do think that talking more about your core values and clearly defining them is really important. And here's why. So an example is that both my husband and I really value freedom. Now, freedom may look very different for me and very different for my husband. So for instance, freedom to me is creative expression. So me being able to express freely how I think, what I feel, etc. Freedom can also be me wanting to live in different places. And that's also why I'm choosing the digital nomad career, right? Like I want to be able to live anywhere I want, go anywhere I want. To me, like that's freedom. Now, when you ask my husband what freedom looks like to him, his is more an emphasis on financial freedom. And so again, if you're talking about specific words when it comes to core values, it's really important that you ask your partner, hey, what does that word exactly mean to you, right? Tell me a little bit more. What does the definition of that word mean to you, right? Because really, a lot of words can mean different things to people. Essentially, what I'm trying to say is that it's really important that these tough conversations are had beforehand, because the thing is that if you're not clear on a definition of a word before you get married, things may kind of look different later on. And basically, you're just gonna not even realize that until the time comes, right? You don't want to wait until like years later after your marriage when you realize that, oh shoot, like what she meant by freedom looks really completely different than what I thought freedom meant for me. That is why I think it's really important to be super specific on your core values, because I personally think that it's really one of the biggest reasons why a couple stays together is that they agree on the same values, right? Obviously, love needs to be there, but I would even argue that values are much more important than having similar interests. Sleeping separate is something that my husband and I do all the time. And it's funny because I was telling one of my friends this, and she looked at me and she was like, oh, like, is everything okay? And I think that there's this misconception that just because you're sleeping separate and taking space from one another, it is always labeled a bad thing. But the reason why we sleep separate is because in human design, I'm a projector. When I sleep on my own, I just sleep better. Not because he snores, not because of anything. It's just a preference that I have. And I think that it doesn't have to mean that there's anything wrong with your relationship. Which also brings me to the point that your relationship or your marriage is gonna look different than other people, and be totally okay with it. There's no specific norm of what a marriage should look like. I think that sometimes we often look at experts too much, or we look at the media too much, we look at movies too much, and we tend to compare ourselves with other people's marriage, thinking like, oh, they must know what's correct based off of what's being shown, and not really ask yourselves what is right for your marriage. So what may work for me and our marriage may be different than yours, and that's totally, totally fine. Okay, so one of the things that I've been really practicing is actually writing down everything that bothers me on my notes on my phone before expressing it to my husband. And what I like to do and I try to do is actually not bring it up until our weekly relationship rituals. So my husband and I do this thing where we meet weekly for about 60 to 90 minutes, and that is intentional time where we talk about our relationship. We talked about what works, what didn't work that week, and kind of what we want to work on in our relationship. We do a relationship exercise, and we really plan for the week ahead. This is something that has been a game changer for our relationship, hence we call it the relationship ritual. And I really think that what we realized is that when we take the time to hold space for ourselves first before coming together, that's when a lot of the issues that were there before kind of disappears. So for instance, I feel like there can be a lot of things that bothers me about my husband, and rather than reacting to it so fast, I'm allowing space to, let's say, form, or I'm allowing space to happen before I express my frustration to my husband. Now, again, I'm still not an expert on this, but basically, instead of being so reactive, I'm allowing myself to process these emotions that are coming up before sharing my feelings with my husband. So therefore, it's a win-win, right? I'm allowing time to settle. I'm allowing space, right, to really process what's going on. And if it still bothers me by Sunday, which is when we actually do our meetings, then I can bring it up to my husband. And because so much time has passed and there's that spaciousness, I'm able to express what bothers me in a very kind, in a way that understanding for my husband, or that he can accept. Oftentimes I feel like we can just blurb out, or we just react to things so fast, and we don't give ourselves time to process what's coming up for us. Especially nowadays. I feel like nowadays you can just go on YouTube, or you can go on a social media app and get what you want right away. And it has really trained us as humans to just get things fast rather than holding space for ourselves to process what's actually coming up for us. You're not gonna like this, but the problem is most likely you. Unpopular opinion, but the moment I took responsibility for my feelings and the things that were going wrong in my life, and not continuously blame my husband, that is when things turned around for me. And I wish I knew this before getting married. I used to think that, okay, once you get married, you have someone to lean on, and you can go to this person to basically fulfill all of your needs. And that was such a backwards type of thinking. Granted, your significant other is supposed to be there for you, and it's a commitment, a lifelong commitment, and you're committed to one another. But I think one of the most overlooked things is the sense that we're always expecting the other person to fill our cup without filling our own cup first. I have it. 4 things I wish I knew before I got married. Obviously, I'm still married, but I really just had these profound realizations after my trip, and I wanted to share it with all of you. So let me know in the comments if what you thought of this video. If you like this video and you found value from it, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to this channel for more videos like these. Okay, well, until next time, see you later.